Well, my mama met my daddy down in Alabama.
Not so, here I am.
Put on the bayou on the Texas line. Love Louisiana, raised in life.
I was explaining to someone the other day I was like, man, if you take a soil test this year and you've got 40 parts per million phosphorus available right now, right, and you come back next year and you take another soil test and you've got 40 parts per million phosphorus available, is that the same 40 parts per, of that 40 parts per million, is it the same atoms?
No.
Right.
No, it's
But why is it still like 40?
same microbial population.
It's
like
your
this
limiter factor.
Right, and so like that's kind of like going back to the like economy thing. That's like the GDP, right? What your soil's able to hold. Now you can artificially pump that up with some synthetic input, right? You come in and you put on a bunch of phosphorus or a bunch of potassium, you can synthetically raise those numbers. But if you leave a piece of ground alone 5, 10, 15, whatever years, or a brand new piece of ground that's never been touched, you come in and you soil test, there's going to be phosphorus and there's going to be potassium. It's going to be less in some areas, right? You get into parts of Texas, it's probably going to be pretty low, right? You get up in parts like Iowa, Indiana, it's probably going to be pretty high. And so it varies a lot, but I look at that as like, that's the GDP of the ground, like what the ground's able to support. You know, going back to the soil conversion conversation, it's like, okay, well, can you take a ground that has a really low natural GDP and artificially increase that GDP so that way it's able to sustain, not, throwing synthetics at it and going, this is not a bash on synthetic fertilizers, just, you can increase the levels on a soil test by simply coming in and saying, okay, well, let's just put on 400 pounds of, fertilizer out there and put some DAP and potash on it, whatever, and boom, all those levels go up. But that's like an artificial, there's all of that nutrients there artificially versus, hey, we're going to increase the holding capacity of the soil, how much it's normally holding because of the microbial population, the microbial exchange, and the nutrient exchange in the soil.
Yeah.
And so, like, I started looking into that, and, like, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and, like, trying to figure out, like, how long does it take, here, I'm going to ask you, you've been so quiet, how long does it take to convert, like, is soil conversion a thing? Can you take crappy soil and convert it into good soil?
I say it takes about like 3 to 5 years, and I think input's going to matter a lot on that.
And what would you say?
Depending on the process, I would say that's pretty spot on between
Like 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, maybe 7, depending on how slow you're going. And
Yeah.
If you're really going after it, I'd say you could probably do it in 2.
Two to 3.
Yeah.
And so I
it
started,
definitely matters.
yeah. And so, like, I started looking at that from, like, a mathematics standpoint of, like, okay, because it's not just, like, us four saying that, right?
Yeah.
I've talked to so many different people that
That's the standard.
say, like, after 3 years, all of a sudden, man, it's so different. Whether it be other biological companies or people that are working with organic matter. And, like, that is the next conversation is, like, what's the magic formula, right? But I was really curious, like, why is it always 3 years, or more or less? Like, it tends to be more or less 3 years is kind of the benchmark. I was like, there's got to be, like, a mathematical explanation to that. And so then I started looking at, like, well, how does bacteria reproduce?
Dividing.
Right. It divides in two. If you're stimulating the ground in a way that you're basically doubling the population, right? And it can only double at, a certain rate. No matter whether you start with a population of 5 in the ground or a population of 5,000, if your ceiling is 100 million, right? Population of 100 million bugs. After 3 years, no matter your starting point, you'll almost always end up there, right? Because if you take, let's just do the math on this, right? So let's say you have a population of 500, right? Which is like nothing. And we're trying to get to 100 million, right? So year one, 500 times 500. So that'd be 250,000 times 250,000. In 2 years, you're already at 62, is that trillion? 62 trillion?
Yeah.
Right? And that's in only 2 years at a doubling rate. Let's say you start with 5. So we started with 500. Let's say you start with 5. So 5 times 5, 25. 25 times 25, 625. 625 times 625, 390. And then 390, this is year 4 that we're on right now, starting at the bare bottom, right? 152 trillion, which, like, that's way past our cap. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, no matter what, in like 3 to 4 years, the exponential factor, you hit that. Like, it's an exponential curve in mathematics where it's just like, and 3 to 4 years, it doesn't matter what your starting point was. It could be freaking 2, right? You're going to hit that point.
I think going back to what we said earlier, I think in the meantime, while you're getting there, keeping up with synthetics and keeping up with feeding the plant for right now.
Yeah, I'm not saying
you
like
use that as a
stop.
long-term.
Well, and I feel like that's why a lot of people don't like know how to enter into like this world of microbial bacteria and like microbiology and like all this stuff, is because they look at it as like, oh, that's its own path.
Yeah.
Like it's either that or this. I feel like, if you can kind of start to marry the two, you've got certain farming practices that might make it more difficult to maintain, right? So you're having to constantly manage that. But
Yeah, I mean, I think me and Miller were actually talking about this the other day. It's kind of like one of the.
Miller was talking.
It was.
I keep thinking he has duct tape over his mouth.
Two things. One thing is, I was thinking about when you're talking about that doubling factor. That's exactly how my financial advisor told me my money was going to work in my stocks. For some reason, the math didn't do this.
I didn't end up with $15
What kind of penny?
Financial advisor, aka me. Or one of those like South Park episodes, like, and it's gone. Where'd it go? It's gone.
The second thing is,
Dogecoin?
kind of like the same way that we've been applying, fertilizer recommendations haven't really changed since like the late 1940s, early 1950s when we started recommending NP and K. But one of those rules of thumbs that I kind of always heard anyways when I first got into it was you need to have a unit of nitrogen for every bushel of corn that you want to produce, right? And now we know through advancements, in the industry that that's not true. And I've seen it first case basis is I've seen a guy that is a competition corn grower on the East Coast in Maryland. And he was on average, his best farm was like 325, but on average, he was like in that 265, 285 range. And he was somewhere along the lines of, a unit of nitrogen for every bushel of corn that he wanted to produce. He started getting really big into regenerative ag, microbial activity, soil health, and he was able to reduce his input of nitrogen from, say you want to go 275 units by probably 25%. And, and when you really get to thinking about it, that never really quite made sense, because if you know anything about nitrogen, you know that it volatiles and dissipates quite quickly, So if you're putting in 300 units, you're not using 300 units. You're not actually receiving 300 units to the plant. A lot of that's going by the wayside into the atmosphere or whatever. And so
it's crazy just how much of it too. Like if you read nitrogen isotope tracking book, like
it's
how
a lot.
Little nitrogen that you apply actually makes it to the plant. Like it's crazy to me when I talk to guys that like have this assumption that like, oh, every unit I put out there is going to the plant.
Not at all. And that just kind of
shooting a shotgun.
Yeah.
And that just kind of proves where you can have, going back to symbiotic, you can have a commercial input along with your more regenerative ag outlook with the microbial life and soil health. Because if you think about it, if a majority of your nitrogen is dissipating and volatating, and they say it took 300 units to create 300 bushels, that's really what that means is you need 300 units so you can waste most of it, so we can grab what we need to create this corn crop. And so if you increase that by 25%, the efficiency of what you're taking back out of that nitrogen, that's a 25%, savings on your economic return on nitrogen, which is huge for any farmer. That's huge for anyone on anything. I mean, if I got 25% savings on groceries, I would be sitting real pretty right now.
And when you get to that point with, 25% nitrogen and P and K, it becomes huge.
Well, see, and that's the thing. It's like I feel like phosphorus and potassium, are the easiest first ones to tackle as far as like, what can we eventually eliminate as far, or at least significantly reduce the input need of compared to, nitrogen. Like nitrogen's one of those things where it's like, man, you got some companies out there that their biggest thing is like, oh, this is a nitrogen replacement. I'm like, I never replace your nitrogen, because worst case scenario, you're just going to grow a bunch more. I'm like, keep the energy, put the gas in the tank. But if we can get a better miles per gallon out of the tank we're using, then awesome,
Well, I mean, it's just.
But I say that, but then I've also got guys that grow 265 bushel corn with 60 units of input on nitrogen, and so I'm like,
Yeah. I mean,
You know?
if that's what your goal is, and you want to save money, all for it. But if
Yeah.
you want to keep that same input and then increase your output, which every soil has its potential, right? There's some soils that just can't grow 300 bushel of corn. It just is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But
And so like that's one thing. Sorry.
no. That's pretty much where.
But that's one thing, like, so going back to like soil types and like conversion and everything, it's like, why is it that in, Texas and Oklahoma and like, these southern states, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, why is it that it's so much harder to grow high yield corn crop versus Iowa, Indiana, Illinois?
This is something that Miller knows a lot about, and one of the products that we use a lot as well that kind of is a synthetic way to increase your holding capacity is humic acid, and Miller
Yeah.
knows a lot about that and how that
Well,
affects
and
that type of
one
stuff.
big aspect as well is
I think the question I'm meaning to ask is this. Sorry to interrupt, but this is the question I'm meaning to ask is, why is it the soil types down here tend to be more sandy and arid and less nutrient?
that's not always the
Rich.
case.
It's not always the
Depends
case.
on
Like
where
you
you
get in
are.
the Mississippi Delta,
Yeah,
right? And it's
quite.
really great, but why?
I mean, we're
Well, but then you go to the same point of
But
why are
why-
they only making 40 bushels?
Uh,
of-
No,
basically-
but why in like those areas is the soil better?
Just
what's
washing
different?
down the Mississippi River, depositing.
I mean, we're about to get who's that fellow that
What?
does the scientific podcast, and he said, "I'll take you way back."
Bill Nye,
No, not
Or,
Bill
uh,
Nye.
It's the dude with
Neil deGrasse.
Neil
Yeah,
deGrasse
yeah.
Tyson. Yeah, him, and he's what is
That hair
I
past
mean, from my knowledge of it, it has a lot to do from how a lot of the United States was formed and a lot of how the ice was melted.
Yeah.
You took a lot of that topsoil, and those icebergs, as they were melting and pushing down into the coast, grabbed a lot of your topsoil from different places and moved it into other parts of the country. And so I would basically say, I think my main guess would be erosion. Erosion in
I think
proximity
erosion
to
is definitely part of it, but this is my argument. I'm gonna make my argument.
Make your argument. No,
My argument
tell you.
is climate, right?
Yeah,
Because like, what happens to bacteria if it gets really, really cold?
kills it.
No.
Oh, it goes dormant.
Yeah, because like we could thaw out like icebergs in Antarctica and find bacteria
Yeah.
we haven't seen in recorded history, and then you see how I skirt around that without like saying thousands or millions of years.
However long it's been.
Yeah, I mean, and so it can get extremely cold, goes dormant or freezes, right? But then what happens if bacteria gets really hot?
Dries it off.
It dies, right? So like it's tolerant to really cold, but it's not tolerant to really hot. The same goes for like heat and dry tend to be synonyms, right? Tends to be whenever something gets really hot, it dries out a lot quicker, which also is a negative environment for bacteria to grow in. So like my argument would be that with southern soil, they tend to get hot and dry later in the year, and it creates a more difficult environment for those microbes to survive in. Like we talked a lot about economy and everything, right? And like, being able to sustain that side. But you also have to have the environment that can sustain life.
Oh, I
mean,
agree.
that's my thought process between
Yeah.
the difference in the soil types.
I do think it's a mixture of that, and also there's hardly any, if no lime quarries in at least Mississippi and Louisiana. There's one. The access to raising the pH is low, so it goes by the wayside. Because most of it comes off the Mississippi River. So
Right.
not only, I mean, yeah, the heat and the drying is causing an impact on it, but also,
Yeah, I just mean like naturally, like if
Yeah,
you
the bad
didn't lime,
pH.
if you didn't even grow a crop,
yeah,
right? Like
Well,
forget about farming for a minute. I'm just talking about like the dirt. Like,
Yeah.
and then you go to like the Amazon rainforest. What's the dirt like in the Amazon rainforest?
great.
White, great. Yeah, I mean it's super rich, right?
Yeah.
Like, super rich black
more
dirt.
moisture, more
Right.
yeah.
It's
Well, and then
lower
moist. It never gets
temperatures.
super hot.
I have a guy.
Never gets super cold either. It's always, pretty much the perfect environment for bacteria to thrive in.
Well,
So it's
and
like
I
that's
have a longtime customer right south of the Mississippi Delta, like right
Yeah.
in that area. First called me with like a 4.3 pH, couldn't hardly make hay at all, and he completely cut out nitrogen with clover. Clover fixates all the nitrogen and the microbes, and he doesn't put on any P or K. On 12 acres, he did this year's first cutting with 66,000 pound rolls,
And so what's the magic formula?
microbes and cows.
And so that's like, okay, so this is like the pinnacle, I feel like, if we're ready to get to pinnacle of like
Yeah.
what is the magic
Synopsis.
formula for soil conversion.
Yeah.
And it seems like you said microbes and calcium.
Mhm.
I feel like it's
pH.
missing pH control basically.
Yeah.
So pH control and microbial life. I feel like you're missing one element, which is organic matter. I feel like organic matter implementation, because that speeds up the process.
Oh, you have organic matter decomposed.
Right, but that's
I
still
doubt-
you're relying
I
on the
doubt.
amount of organic matter you naturally have versus
Yeah.
implementing organic matter from the outside. My magic formula is organic matter, pH regulation, calcium, and increased microbial activity in life. That's kind of what I feel like is the magic formula.
Oh, I mean, you just can't beat the out of death.
Takes a while to get there.
Most people in Oklahoma, over the past forever, for longer than I've been alive, have been running nitrogen and herbicides, and that's about the magic combo. Convenience, cutting grass. So when you try to step in and run a corn operation in Oklahoma, you've got 30, 40, 50 years of abuse. So your, organic matter's low, and then you start implementing all this stuff, and you have to go extra hard with adding extra juice, extra energy for these microbes to start working over the soil to actually get to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It hardens up the ground. Just bad practices, I think, all over the place. So it's an uphill battle
Yeah.
trying to get to where you need to be.
Well, and I think key there is being patient with it. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and
Yeah,
take
and
your
I feel like
time
that's,
and feed the plant in the process. And
right.
you'll get
I feel like
ready
that's
to
what
be
gets a lot of people is not.
wanting right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why most people start and quit no-till within
Yeah.
2 to 3 years. It's
Yeah.
because it's a hard process. You're dealing with a lot of weeds. You're dealing with a lot of processes that you're not really used to. It takes a while to see the benefits from it. For sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I put a Slim Jim at the front of the table at the beginning of this recording.
Not sponsored by Slim Jim.
There's a Slim Jim here for anyone who wants it. There's one Slim Jim.
This camera's been
Miller,
recording.
it's in your mouth.
Swallow it like a man.
Tim.
Slim 10.
Tim took it?
Well, Miller threw it
I
at
threw it
Tim.
on him because Slim 10. That was my bad.
Who wants the Slim Jim? Who wants to eat?
I don't want to eat it. Ian.
I'm scared.
I
That's
think
too
Miller
processed.
dished it off. So
Johnny
we're
said
gonna
he
have
wanted
you
it.
on camera for only farmers.
Okay. I was gonna say whoever took the Slim Jim was gonna get a special prize.
Oh.
Oh.
Damn.
Sounds ominous. I want no.
No, who wants the Slim Jim?
I don't like him.
All of us are scared of you right now.
All of us
Miller?
are scared.
I feel like Miller should have to take the Slim Jim because he's
Yeah.
two
He
words.
threw it at Tim, so I feel like it's him.
All right.
I would like you to stand in front of the green screen for me.
With his Birkenstocks on. I'm camera shy, boys. I don't know
You
if you know
can
that or not.
sing a song.
Would you like to sing a song, a country song?
I know like 2 verses of one song.
Well, my mama met my daddy down in Alabama. Tied a knot, so here I am. Born on the bayou on the Texas line. Love Louisiana, raised and live alive.
Nice! Way to go. Good job. Proud of you. Enjoy that Slim Jim.
Yeah.
That's the joke. Well earned.